said she's been work through the recordings.
Okay.
If we can just have Latifa repeat her nice comment.
Yeah, so like I was saying, I really appreciate the work that this committee is doing. I really appreciate all the detail, and yeah, it's much appreciated. Thanks so much.
Any other public comment? All right, let's go into what we have items for discussion today. So these are the goals that we have for the subcommittee, right? Goal number 1 is to invite existing and future businesses to the resource center to train residents to meet local hire goals. Our goal 2 is to engage existing and future developers that committed to community benefits agreements. And our goal 3 is to develop an equitable development metrics for future North Richmond developments. Now, I know that we've been working on goal 3. Is there any updates on goal 3 before I ask about updates for goal 2 and 1?
Yes, I do have updates for goal 3. And what I did, basically, I'm going to do a quick screen share. Based on our conversation we held, I just kind of compiled it all because I know as our working group, we have our very unorganized notes, but this is something we can share with you all. So again, the rationale, we believe that North Richmond has suffered due to the continued approval of harmful development projects in the surrounding community. The North Richmond Municipal Advisory Council and its community deserve a way to assess which development projects align with the vision of the community. The approach is to create a rubric for real accountability and community benefits that include 1, a transparent way to evaluate development projects, 2, a people-driven strategy to demand community gains, and 3, an opportunity to set the development parameters by the community and score based upon the desired criteria. Our goals to create a mechanism of enforcement and accountability that is created by the community, utilized by the North Richmond MAC members, and referenced by the planning staff at the Department of Conservation and Development to include in their staff recommendations. The tool is not yet finalized, and we hope to have a community meeting to co-develop the beginnings of the tool. Save this date on your calendar on June 28th, 2023. So in the next month. So those are just quickly putting these updates in that form. I don't know, Princess or Hannah, if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, so from the subcommittee that we presented at when we first started the equitable development metrics, we had gathered a lot of notes there, which I am compiling right now and developing purpose statements for the equitable development metrics that we will be sharing at the community meeting. Hannah?
Yeah, I think that about covers it. I think, yeah, the only thing I'll add is that, at that community meeting on June 28th, we hope to get a lot more feedback and input from community members that will inform what we eventually put in the metric itself.
Also, I wanted to ask there was a department mentioned there. And so is that particular department, is that all inclusive? Like, because my understanding is that department, there's planning, there's the supervisors board. So if we just put that one organization, will that be enough?
Yeah, that's good feedback. So what you're saying, Latifa, if I'm understanding correctly, is it's not just the Department of Conservation and Development, but also the Planning Commission at the county and potentially the Board of Supervisors.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we can include a lot of that when we have our community meeting. And then as Princess, Hannah, and I meet, we can also incorporate what you just told us. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, that is good to hear because from what we've been told, the MAC doesn't have any real power, just advisory power, which makes sense for us to start reaching out to all the people that has power and making them know that we're here and we are, trying our best to be community oriented. Another thing that I want to mention is that Hannah so graciously has a list of all the developers in North Richmond that came to the North Richmond MAC, and some of them have agreed to community benefits. So that goes into our, I think, goal number 2 or 1 of how we want to move that forward. Was there anyone here on goal 1 or 2 that are going to, so goal number 1 is to invite existing and future businesses to the resource center to train up local residents. And then goal 2 is to engage existing and future developers that committed to the community benefits.
So I do have some updates in absence of Dawn not being here. I can share some because I work really closely with CHDC on this goal. So thank you, Hannah, for the list, for the updated list. I think that was really helpful, has been really helpful. So we did draft a letter. CHDC drafted a letter. Essentially, it's an invitation to the businesses to come to the resource center to either join for the grand opening. I don't know if they're calling it a grand opening, but an event at the resource center that's coming up in June. I'll share the flyer once it's available. So they are having like a week of activities at the resource center. So it's basically inviting them to come out during that week to kind of meet the staff at CHDC, and also saying like, and if you can attend this week of activities, come get a tour of the resource center and learn more about ways we can partner. And so I think the ask is like, can they come and do a job fair? Can they come and do training, for residents? And CHDC will assist with the community outreach component. And we will work kind of together to do community outreach for these job fairs and these trainings to the community. So that's kind of like the goal right now. The plan right now is to send them a letter and inviting them to the grand opening or to get a tour and partner with the resource center.
What's the date? Oh, sorry, someone was going to say something.
I was just going to add that Dawn just got here, and then I'm going to get you that date.
Thank you.
That sounds really good, Tanya. Yeah, I'm really excited about that date and wondering how this committee could support that event as well.
Yeah, I think it would be great if it would be like all hands on deck that day. Just so that hopefully we do have some businesses that come, they can meet you all, the subcommittee, and all the great work that you're doing within the MAC. So Tuesday, it'll be a weekend of events from June 3rd to June 10th. And this kind of larger event is scheduled for June 3rd. So June 3rd, June 7th, and June 8th is 3 dates where there are going to be different activities happening at the resource center. And I think they're aiming for June 7th to be basically to be a job fair. And so we're hoping that some of these businesses can come for that day and kind of talk about their business, and if there's any job openings that they can share that.
What were the 3 dates you said? The 3rd, the 7th, and what else?
The 8th.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, and once there's a flyer out, I will share with everyone. should be soon.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, let's note those dates. Yeah, I will be out some of those days that you mentioned in the conference and other things. But let's move on to goal number 2 was how are we gonna engage the existing oh well, I'm sorry, Tanya. Anybody else got something to say, Tanya, before we move on?
I
All
don't.
right. So the goal number 2 is that now that we have this list of businesses that agreed to do some community benefits, I guess now it's just a matter of like, how are we going to follow through on that goal?
Yeah, I have had some like next steps ideas listed on the list. I guess I can share that. And if anyone has anything that we should add, I can add it to my list. But essentially, yeah, just filling in the missing pieces. Someone at the MAC meeting did tell me that they noticed that 2 projects were missing from the list, Raven and Power Plant. So I did some investigating with Tanya this week, and the reason that they weren't on this list is because technically those fall under the City of Richmond's jurisdiction, and we only got the permit data from the county. So if there are other projects that are City of Richmond but are still impacting North Richmond, we should add them to this list, I think. So if anyone thinks of any, let me know, and I will try to get in contact with someone at the city to contribute to this. After that, or concurrent, would just be determining like the size of these developers and some sort of determination of their ability to contribute, as that might vary between different types of development projects. So we kind of know what they agreed to during their MAC visit. Eventually, once we have the metric created, then it'd be reaching out to developers to see if they have made progress on their goals, and then also showing them the new metric and seeing if they could contribute to the new goals that the community has come up with. Also just like finding the contact information for the best person to reach out to on each of these projects. I've started to do that here, but I think that'll take some more work to determine who actually has like decision-making power at each of these places. City of Richmond, I think at the last North Richmond MAC meeting, there was a motion to have the coordinator keep track of this spreadsheet going forward, so that's good. And then we can work with county staff, Francisco and Maria, to see how we can implement this in the planning department. I think that would come like at the very end. So yeah, is there anything someone would add or have questions about on this?
Yeah, I'll just add that in our planning meeting, we did talk about creating a user manual. So like creating links so that the coordinator, our Amazing Now coordinator, and any future coordinators can have this user manual of here's this, here are all of the developments, here's where you can jot down the information, here's the background research that was done. So we're calling this a user manual so that it can get handed down to Tanya or anyone else who is in that role. That's the only other thing I wanted to add that we did in our planning team. So I'll be supporting and developing that with the team as a whole. And then I did hear recently that Communities for Better Environment, CVE, is working, I think, on like something related to Raven, but I'm not really quite sure. I still need to meet with their contact. I'm curious does anyone have any information, or if that might be, it might be good to bring them into this space as well. Just want to know how much overlap there is, if anyone has information.
Yeah, I did mention, I mentioned to them that it would be good for them to, well, this last time they had a very short timeline. So I was just saying, like, if when they have more time to be a part of the North Richmond resident leadership team, and then also the NRMAC. And yeah, and I saw that, yeah, so basically they have been in the background, like last year we did a Zoom meeting with Raven SR. And so they have been doing groundwork in the legwork in the background, just kind of pushing back, communicating with the city of Richmond on some concerns about the project, about the hydrogen project and its link with Chevron, and just a lot of, and the environmental impact that it'll have on North Richmond residents. So Connie, the attorney, has been communicating with the city of Richmond. I believe there's a opportunity to comment at the May 14th meeting, city council meeting, but it's kind of a back and forth process, but they're really engaged. Lazuli, Kayla, Connie, all of those from CPE are just trying to get a better resolution. So if they're not able to get everything that they're asking for with regard to with regard to the environmental issues, their pushback, they're looking to get some things for the community benefits. So that's another reason why I mentioned this group and mentioned Dulce. And yeah, so hopefully they'll be, you all can have a conversation, and yeah, so thanks.
Okay, good to hear. I do have a follow-up with Lazuli, so it's good to hear that context. And we can bring whatever we learned into our planning sessions and then report back out with you all. Don, do you want to expand on your comment? You mentioned Henry used to be the main contact person.
Yeah, he just was, yeah, he was just the main contact that interacted with him, and he would bring some of them to the MAC meeting when different initiatives were going forward. So yeah, we lost that contact. Unless there's somebody else that I don't know of, but he was the main one.
And Henry was, working on the Raven project?
No, I'm just with the organization.
Oh, okay.
CBE, I guess is.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there are different initiatives and different programs. They would come to the MAC and you know, give us the insight on what's going on, and they would also continue periodically to give us updates on what's going on and notify us of different, you know, meetings and stuff.
You bring
I can't remember that, Tanya. I don't know if you remember the person that he was mainly in contact with, but there was a few people. I just don't remember.
I actually don't know. I don't think I've met Henry from CBE, but I know.
No, Henry from the MAC.
Henry from the MAC. Oh.
Yeah, Henry Clark. Yeah.
Yeah, Henry Clark, of course.
Sorry, I should have been more explicit.
Yeah, I think we are in community with CBE. Like we know staff people there right now. So yeah, I think it sounds like Dulce, you're gonna reach out to them to see where they're at with their kind of initiative or campaign with Raven.
Yeah, mostly in connection to this committee, but Don brought up a good point, which is Henry used to be their main contact, Dr. Henry Clark. It wouldn't hurt to see if CBE, whether it's Lazuli or someone from the team, could present at the next MAC meeting, just to get a general overview of like, what projects are you working on that intersect in the North Richmond community? And then, yeah, I'll just meet with Lazuli more on like the things that we're working on and how it informs this committee.
That's a great idea. I know they have a tour happening this upcoming weekend, I think in Richmond and East Oakland, and they always stop in North Richmond.
That sounds good. So do we have so those are our next steps for goal number 2?
Yeah, I do want to flag that I guess one of the recommendations from Francisco was from the planning department was that at some point, if you, as the MAC, wanted to, in partnership with our office, like invite some of these businesses back to the MAC to give updates, that may be a good way to kind of get a status update of like, you know, where they're at with whatever, you know, their local hire, if they were able to hire locally, if they were able to donate to the community, or, you know, where, just to kind of get a status update. So I don't know if, you know, I can work with someone on that letter, and then drafting a letter of some sort, you know, so that we, you know, could start inviting people, different businesses to come to the MAC.
Also, for those that have trucking, or like maybe at some point it might be a longer time frame, but just to see how do they have any plans to go to zero emission to meet those standards for the companies that applies? Yeah, just to find out, do they plan to make that switch, and what's the time frame?
Yeah, I think updates is a good idea. It covers a lot of different territories that folks committed to doing, so it makes sense.
Yeah, echo it. Really good idea, really good next step. So offering up one time for 1 second, anybody here want to volunteer to work with Tanya to develop and draft that email and reach out to these businesses?
Okay. I mean, Tanya, I don't mind looking at a draft or something and work with you on it. It's fine with me.
Yay. Thank you, Don. All right, let's note that. All right, so we are kind of done going over item 4. So our next item is presentation of proclamations, environmental justice and equitable development community groups, Healthy CC. Is this still a thing?
I think that would be me.
Oh, thank you, Dante.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I think I've met everybody here in different meetings, but it's nice seeing everybody here. But I'll just state who I am. So I'm Dante, pronouns him, his, and I am the project manager for resident leadership with Healthy Contra Costa, formerly known as Healthy Richmond. I'm going to share my screen and also put in the chat the link to the presentation. And I think, Tanya, thank you for sharing the link yesterday of the draft kind of like summary of our advocacy with the North Richmond Brookside site. But let me just drop this in the chat real quick. All right. So that's the link to the presentation. And I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Okay. I think everybody can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we can.
All right, perfect. All right, so as I mentioned, just going to cover what we learned and share our recommendations moving forward related to this Brookside site advocacy. So first off, just want to acknowledge, even sitting here for the first time today, learning a lot about what y'all do. I think it's really great work, and I'm excited to hear more about the outcomes of everything that y'all are doing. Y'all are doing a lot aside from this type of work too, so this is really exciting work. And then the purpose of today's presentation, we do want to, as I mentioned, share what we learned, our experience around this site, and through this document and presentation, which hopefully contains ideas and information that can hopefully inform stronger holistic lens in the future and when looking at brownfield sites and economic development in the North Richmond community. And then just as a note, I put the definition of what a brownfield site is at the bottom, according to the US EPA, which is basically an area that has hazardous contamination in the soil. And lastly, we do want to create a warm handoff of these ideas and share knowledge with you all about this potential recommendation of either like an expansion of this group that looks at environmental justice and economic development and other aspects, community health, climate change, in a more robust way. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Tanya did share a link to like my draft summary of what has happened. And it has like a overview of many things that happened over the course of about technically 4 years, I believe, of what Healthy Richmond or Healthy Contra Costa noted related to the site. And on the right side of this slide, you can see a watered down summary. So I'm just going to quickly try to summarize it. So we know that Centerpoint, which is the developer of this site, plans to create a warehouse at that North Richmond Brookside site, which is in between Verde Elementary and also the Urbanville Farm. The North Richmond resident leadership team actually sent in a letter of opposition back in 2019 around, I think, the winter time. And this site does have contaminated soil due to the previous owner, which was Color Spot. And then I just noticed in the chat, Hannah, your chat comment, I can send also the link to this summary in the chat too in a bit momentarily. But Color Spot was there as, and they caused the contamination. But since the owner of the properties changed to Centerpoint, they became in charge of cleaning up the site. So they got another group called Cornerstone Earth Group to do the draft removal action work plan, which needs approval by the Department of Toxic Substance Control, or the DTSC. And then throughout this process, like the North Richmond residents and community that we were talking to, the resident leaders, and many others felt like they weren't really centered throughout this whole process. Whether the conversation would be around community engagement, community health, environmental justice, economic development, many aspects. And then we raised this issue both at the North Richmond MAC meeting back in August 2nd of last year, I believe, when the DTSC project manager shared a presentation, and this led to us raising the issue with the Board of Environmental Safety. And that led to multiple chains of events that halted the cleanup itself and also the development of the warehouse. And there are apparently community benefits for the site. There should be around $750K from Centerpoint that would, I believe, pass through the planning division of Contra Costa County. And it would be dedicated to specifically anything public health related, especially air quality improvement. And what we learned throughout this process, the big statement is that, like, no matter how much community engagement we would have done around informing the type of cleanup and the development, the DTSC is bound by state law that because of the type of zoning and the purpose of the type of development that would rise, they couldn't do a full cleanup of the site. And then currently, we haven't heard anything from the DTSC, Centerpoint, or the Board of Environmental Safety. It's been quiet for about maybe 2 or 3 months now, I believe, maybe even more. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And I put these 2 icons at the bottom, like a bunch of networks and then also a bunch of arrows, because throughout this process, we were kind of like, okay, talk to the DTSC and now talk to the planning department, talk to Joya, talk to this person, talk to that felt like the process, which was really hard, especially as like a policy advocacy group, but also like with the residents joining along in this. So yeah, that's kind of how I believe we felt. And then so here's our like a recommendation with some initial language. So first, basically to create some sort of group that entails both like economic development and environmental justice being at the core value. And then having residents leading this group while collaborating with the CBOs and the environmental justice organizations, county health services, the Hazardous Materials Commission, the DCD or the planning department of the county, elected officials, school district representatives, the DTSC, and also involving some sort of legal and legislative support or research. Throughout this process during the, I don't know how many months now, like we were in separate conversations with these different groups, trying to understand like what's their role is, what can they can contribute, how can the residents be part of those conversations. And this was an idea that we also created with the through multiple conversations with the community and also the North Richmond resident leadership team. And we added some more descriptions here. So the purpose of this group would be to look at the intersection of planning and development, environmental justice, climate change, community health, how to streamline communications, and ensure authentic and meaningful engagement of residents throughout the policy and practice processes from the beginning of the idea of some sort of development happening, which might actually align with what y'all are already talking about. And then we also recognize that this is very important because not every site proposed will have an environmental impact report. And then there's some bullet points I have here about basically like community ownership, having community voice centered in recommendations and funding allocations for community benefits, which is what sounds like y'all are also working on. Keeping this group informed of local planned or implemented policies that are happening that can affect and are relevant to a proposed site. And then for sites requiring frequent monitoring, so for example, I believe every 5 years for this site, they would check like the floor or the cap of the potential warehouse. And having that group informed to inform the community at large would be very important too. And then having this subcommunity and general community being notified, engaged prior to the point of when a developer's proposal is approved and the county's CEQA approval. And then just like generally informing the way that community engagement is done, how outreach is done. When we were having conversations with some of the residents and their concerns on how this was like handled, some of them received a notice at their mailbox, but some didn't. It wasn't in a language that they understood, so they couldn't really engage. And if they did try to look at the information shared, like navigating something called Envirostore, which has like 500-page documents, isn't really, accessible and understandable for the community. And then also partnering with the county to apply for grants that can actually help with the cleanup and also other things that the community can benefit from. So I'll move on to the next slide. And I'm going to share with you kind of like our ideal workflow process of like in a perfect world, like what could have happened if like this group was established and there could have been more community ownership or residents being centered at every step. And I just want to point out like this is like from our point of view based off our experience. So like there might be missing stages. It might be inaccurate in terms of like the way we just don't know what happens behind the scenes sometimes between like, I don't know, the DTSC or the planning department or whoever. So this is our lens. So it starts off here in this first left box. So like imagine if we had this recommendation, which is this placeholder name, North Richmond Environmental Justice and Economic Development Subcommittee, right? And the people that are involved in this, the residents, partners, whoever, are all able to receive trainings, whether it's around CEQA, how to use Envirostore, navigating certain, having a shared understanding and language that will prime them with what they need and what they need to know in order to have meaningful conversations to inform cleanups, the development or whatever. And then if a developer or entity goes to the Department of Conservation and Development for applying for a permit to build, modify, open a business in existing buildings or conduct grading or filling of site. So for example, at the North Richmond Brookside site, Centerpoint was doing that. Like in ideal world, the community should be like notified and engaged about this developer applying for a permit from the DCD. And then this group, this idea, this recommendation would be informed about this too and consulted before the approval of the developer's application. And then through more direct community engagement with the developers, the different entities, DCD, DTSC, they can provide input on maybe the site can be used for something else, what are the different types of community benefits, expand the way that they look at risk or benefit and risk cost analysis with more of an equity lens. And then a decision might be made. So the county might disapprove of this redevelopment plan, or they might approve of it, which can lead to the next slide. But I just also want to know, like I put at the bottom, throughout this whole process, the residents and also this subcommittee group should be involved. They should have support and technical assistance throughout this whole process, be provided with education. Not only do we want to like interact with these different entities, but we propose like actually build relationships with the community at large, so that if something arises like from 10 years from now related to the site, that these different entities will have a space to communicate directly with representatives and residents themselves. And then ongoing public health prevention, if it's a brownfield site, is important. So then, as I stated earlier, if like the developer purchases the site and the county approves of this redevelopment plan, this will lead to this step right here. So if CEQA applies and an initial study indicates that there is a need for a deeper analysis or environmental impact report for the removal action work plan or cleanup and redevelopment, there should be a public comment period for the draft and final removal action work plan and other relevant CEQA documents that should happen concurrently or at the same time. And I just put some notes in this under this step right here. So like there different entities might lead these different processes independently. So that's like something to note. And I mentioned earlier, like in this scenario for the Brookside site, the past owner was ColorSpot. They didn't clean up the site, even though they should have been responsible since they caused that contamination, which led Centerpoint to be responsible. And then moving on from that, the DTSC should distribute surveys while distributing it through the existing networks in North Richmond to get higher increased response rates. I believe during their survey that they released, there was only about 16 responses out of a community that's about 3,500 plus. So that was concerning. And then DTSC also needs to change their model of community engagement. So like having dialogues, panels, or tours, which we try to incorporate in the past few months, so that we can learn from one another and actually have deeper discussions that go beyond just like somebody checking off boxes off of a survey. And then DTSC should provide transparent, accessible, community-friendly, and concise clarity on the different types of options of cleanup and the overarching policies affecting their decision-making matrix for the type of cleanup. As I mentioned earlier, like we kind of ran around so many different community engagement processes for no reason in a way, because that state level policy that states like, well, we can't clean up beyond this level because the type of development is a warehouse versus if it was other sensitive use, you know. And then, so the DTSC developer and the community should also co-create community-informed safety plans. Their current like plans are kind of like, well, what if there is human error? They should be like very careful with that. So being able to inform that is important. And then during the cleanup of a site, there should also be like increase in the number of DTSC staff, like at the actual site itself. And then also like cleanup and other related staff that might not actually be like staff of DTSC, to ensure that there's like a rapid response to community issues. And there should be more periodic testing and evaluations of the site itself and its potential impacts, while considering climate change and other factors, such as a community that's already being, trying to adapt to communities that are environmentally burdened. So that's kind of like informed by the site that we were advocating to have a full cleanup. And then these next two slides, after some conversations, I'm not going to run through it. It's very similar, but in a normal scenario, the original developer, or the original owner of the site, so for example, ColorSpot, should have been the one to clean up the site, and that would have resulted in different processes. And I try to lay that out here in these two slides. But for sake of time, I'm not going to go over that. And I know that there might be like comments or questions, but we have our own set of questions too, and I'll just read them out loud. So is this equity, economic and equitable development subcommittee like currently building resident-led capacity in spaces similar to the North Richmond resident leadership team that might already align with this idea of having a cross-sector group that involves residents, environmental justice organizations, community-based organizations, and other related entities that tie into the type of efforts that we were kind of discussing. And is it possible for this group? Does it align with what you're already doing? And if so, like, can this expand in the long run? Or will y'all be able to like hold on to this idea for like the future? Or yeah, that's kind of like where we're at. Trying to, and we're, as a Healthy Contra Costa, we're really willing to make the connections between the different folks that we've met from the DTSC, from the research groups that we had to reach out to related to like climate change, and other like identified entities within the county and other partners that might be able to help build the relationship building to lead to potentially this idea or recommendation here. So that's all I have for this presentation. I also do want to pause and like open up the floor for like questions, and feel free like for others that were part of this advocacy, Latifa or Rafa and of Roxanne or whoever, to just share any other ideas. And I'll look at the chat right now.
I just want a couple of things. One, I'm not sure that this based on the guidelines that we presented on the mission for this group, I don't know that it would be under this direction, but if it was, it probably would go back to the MAC for consideration of where was the best way to work on that. The other is, I'm interested to understand, I don't think that I think there are other people that work on this type of activity in the space. I was thinking about CBE, and if there might be, have you researched to see who already has this as a concern and would be a good partner in working with?
Not in particular. I've been like looking at like brownfield specific groups, if that makes sense. But
no, I'm talking about
locally,
other groups that are working on environmental issues that are already in the space. And if there's not, they're not. But it seems like there should be. But I haven't, I just mentioned CBE, but I don't know if there's someone else working in that space. There is a process, and I know the process includes outreach. Now, it probably can be, more targeted in that reaction, because I know they get everybody's household and they send out the notices and all this other stuff. But to take a deeper dive in it, those are the things that I would want to know. If I don't want to reinvent the wheel, if there's already a wheel existing, maybe we can tag on to what's already there and be more impactful, more together.
Yeah, potentially. I don't think there's any one group that specifically focuses on North Richmond. I think currently CBE, APEN, Richmond Hour Power, I think all of those organizations are in the space. I don't know that there's anything specifically geared to North Richmond. And I think sometimes, North Richmond maybe kind of gets lost in representation in in the representation in this area, but it's great, when, we can, others get involved. But again, even with this, this process, the community, I'm glad that this subcommittee is doing something with the community benefits portion. But, as we've heard others say, especially like Leticia, she'll always say, well, our health is not for sale. So, but if the project has been approved, sure, why not get some community benefits? But then again, this wasn't even communicated, that nobody asked the community, once this thing was approved, what they wanted to see. And a lot of times, the people go to the stakeholders, who they call the stakeholders, the organizations, and ask them for input for, what, and for the community benefits. But the organizations are one thing, but the residents, actually live here. And so the communities may work in the space, and maybe some of them may live here, but for the most part, so that's kind of offensive to have an organization make decisions for the residents. And I mean, if they're going to make recommendations, and the residents should also be part of that. So, so you got these amounts. And then, so maybe the residents can now be included as to where they want to see those funds go, because I thought it was pretty arbitrary and why to kind of leave like the 750,000. I think there were a couple of large ones, and I see now there's like a 2.9 million, but, I think the residents should have a say into what those things should actually, where those resources should actually go. Thanks.
Princess, I can go after you.
My bad, I forgot I was facilitating y'all. Go ahead, Dulcie. I see your hand up first.
All right. Well, thanks for the presentation, Dante. It was very thorough. Yeah, it brings back nightmares about doing policy work. So appreciate all of the pushing y'all have been doing. I did want to say a couple of things. I don't know what, and this is just speaking for myself, right? I feel like this committee takes up a lot of my capacity, and this is in my volunteer sort of role. So even as I'm sitting here, I'm not in my Richmond Land time. And so I do know, just based off of us starting the subcommittee back in August, it does take substantial amount of our effort to be able to meet. And so Princess and I meet, and with Hannah meet once every 2 weeks, and we try to get input from Dawn. So just thinking about the real implications, it's could we create another subcommittee, and who might be interested in that? Since we still haven't finished the 3 goals that we sort of initiated on last year in August. So that's one thing. Is maybe suggesting, could we have, I don't know, maybe, I think maybe suggesting something that sits within the current committee that we have. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that you bring up a good point around the conditions of approval, which is sort of what are the community benefits agreements. And that's something that we fully haven't delved into. So it'll be really great to look at. And I think, Tanya, you shared the benefits sort of negotiated package. But it would be good to dovetail that into our process that we have. At what point does the community actually interface or have a say within this development or any development? And then the other thing that I'm a big fan of, just because I also live in North Richmond, is I am striving to move more into participatory budgeting, right? So if there's like $700,000 and usually as the nonprofit friends in the ecosystem, we tend to decide here's how the funding goes. But I think it would be really great to add a layer of like, okay, before we start deciding where this funding goes, that's super important and necessary in the community, let's listen. Let's hold a community participatory budgeting hearing. Let's listen to the community and see where we want these funds to go. And then we can decide where we can put these funds based on what we heard from people, but also based on the realities that we're seeing on the ground. So those are my couple of comments, Dante. I'm really looking forward to dovetailing or collaborating at any point within this committee.
Thank you for that, Dulce. And I see that we are at time, so I definitely want to hear from Roxanne and make a little comment myself. So if y'all don't mind staying about 3 minutes over, please. All right. So I love what you did, Dante. I love the presentation. Definitely agree. I love the aspects of like including all of the power and decision makers at the table and all these different spaces that are out there. Definitely wanting to be in space with each other. I feel like this space is a community-led, the subcommittee, because we offer to the public, right? So this space is community-led somewhat, and it's a subcommittee, and we already do have goals that kind of coexist with what your recommendations are. I kind of feel like utilizing this space would be the best bet, right? And which whenever like these kind of topics come up, we can invite those folks to the space. I'm just thinking of ways that this actually can happen. But I definitely hear the capacity wise, like I'm up to my capacity right now in terms of my time, but I definitely want to support these efforts because I am coming from a background of environmental justice. So I definitely want to support this as well. And I'm wondering if was this developed by the North Richmond resident leadership team? That's my only question.
Your question is, to reiterate, was the recommendation developed by the North Richmond resident leadership team? Yeah, we had was it last month or for the 2 last meetings we were talking about it, like we unpacked like on a Jamboard and everything, like what should have happened, and then from there formulated that, and then also sent out initial emails to other folks just to like understand, like, does this make sense? Does this workflow make sense? But yes, it was informed by that. And the previous learnings through like the community panel and other like discussions that we essentially have like data from. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Dante. And then Roxanne has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Princess. So I agree with everything you mentioned, Princess. Maybe there's a way this group can really work in tandem with the community around issues like this. And I'll just say that for this particular development, the recommendations for community benefits didn't go before the community or even community organizations. I mean, it really was something that was discussed, I think, with Supervisor Joya primarily. Secondly, I think that community benefits agreements are intertwined inextricably with environmental justice, right, in North Richmond. So it's hard to say, oh, that happens in some other space. And then as I sit here and look at my picture of Dr. Clark, you know, he and Miss Annie King were the Environmental Justice Committee of the MAC, you know, for 30, 40 years, right? And Cynthia Jordan. And so the MAC has a history of really looking at environmental justice issues as it related to development. And I think, you know, the three of them took it on every time there was a development that happened in North Richmond. So it's not gonna, it shouldn't happen outside of North Richmond is my feeling. It should happen through the MAC. And I appreciate, you know, North Richmond leadership team members who have expressed that there should also be the opportunity for resident-led space that's not necessarily within an organization, but is a separate sort of space where residents can be directly supported and directly bring their voice to the MAC or this subcommittee. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Roxanne, for that. Tanya, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just really quickly. I know I came late. I joined my position once the project was approved and everything. But I was part of multiple meetings with community groups and residents where we talked to them about the community benefits kind of agreement package and did pivot and change some things based on what we heard from the school, from the Watershed Project, from Urban TILF and others. So there, you know, I'm not to justify like the level of outreach that was done, right? I think we can always do more, but I guess just to kind of highlight that we did have one-on-ones with some of these groups and residents that were mentioned and it did change what you see as a full package now.
Thank you, Tanya. And if there aren't any more comments or direct responses, we are at the end of our meeting, guys, and we will adjourn. And we hope to see you guys back, Dante. Thanks, y'all.
Everyone, great meeting.